Yeah, let's just jump into this. This is a question I have heard many times during the last year, and even before that. Is Vaadin 7 done yet? And okay, Jonas spoiled it a bit because today I'm able to answer yes to this question. I don't have to come up with excuses anymore or reasons why we really shouldn't release it.
He's pretty good at that.
So, Vaadin 7. What is it really? Well, it took us 16 months to do it. It took us a whole lot of tickets to get there, almost 1,000 tickets closed of various sizes. The oldest one created roughly 5 years ago, probably for I think Toolkit 5 something, and the newest one created this Saturday. And, well, this all is included in the package released today. The fixed is almost 1,000 tickets. It also took us almost 4,000 commits. The core development team, basically 6 persons, have done over 90%, close to 95% of these commits. But we're happy that we have also about 17 other authors who have contributed to the Vaadin 7 project. An interesting fact is that during these 4,000 commits, we have touched over 1 million lines of code in the project. What makes it more interesting is that Vaadin 6 doesn't contain 1 million lines of code. So there has been a lot of refactorings, renames, and stuff like this going on. I don't know, how many of you have tested some version of Vaadin 7? 1, 2, 3. Okay, a few. A version of Vaadin 6. A few more. Okay. So those of you who have tested some early development version of Vaadin 7 might have noticed that we did some refactorings also later on in the development series. But now I think we have ended up with a good product. We have integrated Git in the product, as Jonas mentioned. We got 7,000 new Java files as a bonus from that. 7,000 is not that much, so we created almost 900 ourselves also for the project. And now, in the end, we end up with a quite large project with 1.5 million lines of code. Now, okay, we have some test code, 29% of this is test code. You might think this is much, this is little, whatever. We, of course, strive to having 100% test code. Although the functionality might suffer. So, let's talk about some real things. What has changed since Vaadin 6? Well, there are some kind of fundamental changes, at least we have done in our minds. We now feel it's more okay to speak about web technologies, HTML, CSS. We feel it's more okay to talk about servlets, HTTP sessions. I mean, Vaadin has always been a web framework, but the code itself has kind of always abstracted this web layer away, so it's possible to make another user interface, for instance, a native application or something like this. But during the last 5-10 years, it has turned out that it's really nothing that anybody wants to do, plus it unnecessarily makes the API very complex when we are hiding things that everybody wants to use. Another kind of fundamental change is that it's okay to do things on the client side. Of course, it's okay in Vaadin 6 also. But in Vaadin 6, we have pretty much always said that you should do it on the server side because it's easier, it's more flexible, and so on. Now we have more acknowledge that yes, you should do it still on the server side because it's easier, but you should go to the client side when it makes sense. And this is of course made easier also by including WIT in the framework, so you have the client side there always. Now much of the things we really have done on Vaadin 7 is work on internals and structures. These are things you won't see. Hopefully you will notice these in the sense that we fix more bugs more easily, or there aren't as many bugs. They won't be directly visible in the API. But also at the same time we have been aiming for giving the user of the framework more power, more possibilities. So instead of hiding things, abstracting away things like the servlet, we are giving you access to these, ensuring that if you want to go deeper, you can go deeper. Still, if you want to use it as before, you can use it as before. Now let's go into some features of Vaadin 7. I won't be covering all features, but a selected few. The maybe most visible thing you will notice when you come from Vaadin 6 background and go to Vaadin 7 is that you no longer can create an application. And you don't have a main window. You have a window only means a sub-window, because we have heavily restructured this so that we now are basing everything on UIs, which is pretty close to the window in Vaadin 6, but it has the advantages that we can automatically support, for instance, multiple browser tabs. Because the framework will be initializing these UI classes, you won't be doing it yourself. Now, to make this even easier to use UIs, create your applications, we have added the high-level navigation API, also shown in the code here on the slide, that you can use to map your URI fragments to various views. In Vaadin 6 you had URI fragment utility, you had add somewhere and then handle these events yourself and so on and so on. Here we have the navigation API to make this all much easier for you. Of course, again, if you want to do it yourself, we have made all the browser details available to you already in the initialization method for the UI, so you don't have to do various parameter listeners and other stuff like you would have to do in Vaadin 6. Now we also support multiple UI classes for the same URL, should you so choose. So you can make your site serving different UIs, for instance, for phones, tablets, desktops, basically choosing the UI class any way you like, based on what the browser provides. Another area where there have been quite major improvements is the forms and data bindings. It's hard to call it form, because form means something for Vaadin 6 users typically. It means a large monolithic component that's very easy to get started with, and when you're trying to customize things, it might get quite tricky or ugly at some point. So we redesigned the way you should make forms by introducing a field group. The responsibility of field group is just to bind data to fields. It no longer handles anything related to layout. You should just make the layout yourself, the visual editor, using Java code or any way you like. Now, to make the field data binding more clear, we also included or made the fields use generics, making them typed. So a text field would always have a value of type string, or it has in Vaadin 7. In Vaadin 6 you could run into weird issues where the value came from the data model and suddenly it was something else than a string. Now, to deal with the fact that the data model uses different types than the field. We have introduced converters for doing explicit conversions between the types. So if you have your text field that is a string, you bind it to an integer property, the framework will automatically insert an integer to string converter for you. We'll run everything through that when it needs to translate between the data model and the field value. This will also act as an automatic validator for anything that the user inputs. Plus, it will use the locale set for the application. So you no longer have to manually handle parsing of integers, doubles, whatever. We also included a couple of add-ons to make forms and data binding easier. Beam validation, shown here, allows you to annotate your beam class. These annotations will automatically be turned into Vaadin validators that are then run for your whatever input the user provides in the field. The custom field, available as an add-on for Vaadin 6, provides the way to make customized fields, customized UIs that are still work as fields. Finally, the field group implements a two-phase commit, which was missing from Vaadin 6. So here you can be absolutely sure that when you commit your buffered field group, either all of your changes or no of your changes will end up in the data model. Also, you are able to insert your custom commit logic in this process, so you can include the fact that you are storing the beam probability to your database, and if this storing fails, then your fields will be reverted to the previous values. Another part we have done quite an extensive work on is the client side and how you can create and customize the widgets. I think it's really great with Vaadin that it can do a lot of stuff for you, but it can't do everything, and we can't implement every little feature. So it makes much more sense to make it more easy for users to implement the features that are missing. So how have we done this? Well, we're built in GWT. You don't have to worry about what GWT version to use. You hopefully will get more GWT fixes more quickly because Vaadin has a more rapid release schedule than GWT. And you have all the other, of course, advantages of having GWT. Now on the old Vaadin part, we have done some major refactorings on the client side. In Vaadin 6, you had basically you typically used one class on the client side for the widget and the communication with the server. In Vaadin 7, this is split into two parts. We have the widget, that's any standard GWT widget that you want to use. We're still in the process of converting all of our own widgets to be standalone GWT widgets so they can be used in standard GWT projects also. But in addition to the widget, you have the connector class, which deals with the server communication. So you have this nicely divided up with separate responsibilities of the two classes. Now, at the same time as we split this into two, we added support for JavaScript components, where the JavaScript component, it's more or less like the GWT widget. You can use the same logic, the same features available for the GWT connectors in JavaScript, so this makes it really easy to integrate any existing JavaScript component and use it in your Vaadin application. And finally, we have added a whole new concept called extensions in Vaadin 7. The idea with extension is providing more features for an existing component without extending or using inheritance to extend the component. So it's kind of like an add-on for a component. You attach it to the component and it provides some additional features. In Vaadin 6 these were called invisible components sometimes, and you had to use them like adding to a layout and hiding them, or you just weren't able to do stuff like this, depending on the use case. So for instance, the code example here shows how you could, if you are annoyed with the fact that all Vaadin widgets don't have a click listener, you could make a click extension roughly like this, and you could attach it to any component, and then that component will have a click listener on the server side or on the client side, depending on how you implement your extension. Now at the same time we restructured the client side and split it into widget and connector. We put quite a lot of effort also into the communication part. Maybe largest issue, or there were several non-optimalities in Vaadin 6 that we tried to address here by introducing a state object for each component that is automatically shared between the client and the server, or sent by the server to the client. It goes in that direction only. The state object, well, it's a standard Java bean, so you have a strongly typed way of doing communications of the state in Vaadin 7. You no longer have to rely on casting whatever you're sending to the client into the correct type. And well, this also makes it much easier to structure your communications for your component. You can use nested beans, you can use, well, all the simple types available in Java. You can use lists, sets, maps, and so on in your state. So it makes it much more structured. Now from the framework point of view, or also from the user's point of view, what's really nice is that now there's a structure for the communication, and the framework is aware of it, which means it can optimize it. So in Vaadin 7, the server, it has knowledge of what the client knows, and so it can only send the differences, the changes that has been made to the state objects, which means that, contrary to in Vaadin 6, where we would always basically paint the whole state for a component whenever something changes, here the framework will check that, okay, it's only the caption that has changed, we send only the caption to the client. And this way the framework can significantly reduce the communications, the size of the packages it sends. Now this is also used for the initial rendering. Well, the whole state is basically updated for the initial rendering, but the state still has some default value that both the client and the server agrees on. So it works in this case also. In addition to the state that is from the server to the client, so the server owns the state, the client uses the state. In addition to this, we added RPC in both directions, so you can invoke methods on the server from the client and the other way around. And of course, here in the RPC calls, you can use the same types available for your state, so able to send also more complex objects through this RPC. For those of you interested in how the application looks, the theming improvements might be interesting. What we have done on the theming part, firstly and mainly, reduce the number of inline styles, remove the pixel calculations that ended up pretty much everywhere when we used relative sizes. We're now more relying on the browser to handle this. The nice parts here, you can use whatever CSS like border margin, padding, so on, whatever you want. The framework doesn't put any restrictions on that anymore. easier to override styles when they're not inline styles. They're in the theme. Now, speaking of the theme, we have added SAS support to the framework. SAS is kind of like improvement over CSS. Still, the browsers don't understand it, so we have to compile it into CSS. The framework will handle this automatically for you during development, so it's not a problem. What's the use of SAS? Well, the example here shows some of the SAS features. You're able to use variables in your theme. You don't have to copy-paste all your definitions. You're able to nest CSS rules. You're able to use functions like darken the color by 10% and so on. So, although the upper example here in SAS, it has, I think, more characters than the lower example in CSS, it still shows you, or shows the viewer reader much more what's really going on there. And it also enables you then to change, of course, the color for both these tooltips with changing one row. Now SAS, also by providing structure for the theme and more features, it has enabled us to create features to make it possible to use multiple themes on the same page. This is basically implemented by prefixing all theme rules by the theme name, so they won't collide with each other anymore. This is also something that is done automatically for you and for your own theme. Another nice thing is that SAS supports something called mixins, which you can include in your themes, and most, if not all, of Vaadin component themes are now defined as mixins, which means you can pick and choose for your own theme what component you want from which theme. So if you want to use chameleon theme, but you really like the reindeer button, you can just pick everything from chameleon except the button and pick that from reindeer, and you will get a combined theme containing these. Finally, a few words about performance. We set out to really improve the layout performance, and the main means for this were, well, as I mentioned before, doing less layout calculations, do not convert into pixels, and move the responsibility of layout into the browser. Also, we have made DOM lighter whenever that's possible. CSS layout contains some extra DOM levels, we removed those. Made vertical horizontal layout a bit lighter as well. Now the really interesting part in improving the performance on the client side is the reflows. The reflow is when the browser recalculates how everything looks, the sizes of basically every element on the page. And typically this is triggered when you change some value that affects the size, and then you ask the browser what's the new size. So if we look at the pictures here, we can see what Speed Tracer tells us the rendering process of a Vaadin 6.8 UI looks, and what the rendering of a 7 UI looks. Now for 6.8 we can see it's pretty much doing a little bit of JavaScript that's yellow, and then we're doing a reflow, a layout. Then we're doing a little bit of JavaScript, and then we're reflowing the browser again. And so on and so on. And this is really not an optimal way of doing this, because doing the reflow or the layout in the browser, it's not really fast, and there's really no way that you can optimize it. So for Vaadin 7, we have quite heavily restructured how how these layout calculations go, or well, we have tried to eliminate the layout calculations so we don't do them when we don't need them, and when we really need them, then as you can see from here, we're doing them at the same time to avoid this kind of reflow all the time. So this means much better performance, right? Now if you look carefully at the previous slide and calculated the numbers together, you can see that the result is, yes, the layout, the blue part, it's much better in Vaadin 7. The styles part, it's much better in Vaadin 7. And then we do a lot more JavaScript in Vaadin 7. And we end up with a result that, well, it's just as fast as Vaadin 6. So we still have some work to do on this. The good part here is the work we have already done for 7.01 shows that the JavaScript part can be reduced quite a lot. Because we are now, as we're talking about JavaScript performance, there are a couple of good things. First of all, the browser makers are very interested in improving JavaScript performance. They're not that interested in removing or improving the reflows. So now that the problem is JavaScript, it's much easier to optimize. And as we see here, well, this is the upcoming nightly of 7.01, and we can see that it's already a lot faster than 6.8. When talking about browsers, we always end up talking about Internet Explorer. It's a bit strange how no matter which Internet Explorer is the oldest version you support, it will always be a problem. Here we have nice Internet Explorer 8, around 10 times slower than all other browsers. In the 7.00 version, it's actually much worse than the 6.8. But the good thing is that the optimizations we're doing now for 7.01 show that the IE8 rendering time will also drop significantly. So we will get to a much lower level than in Vaadin 6. And well, the other interesting part here is the IE9 statistics, because IE9 just gets faster and faster, even though all browsers get slower in between. No idea what's going on there. Yes, there are a couple of more features in Vaadin 7, as you can see here. If we have a unanimous decision that I should go through all these, if you all raise your hands right now, I will start going through this list and explaining every one of these features. Okay, not that many hands. So, let me just move on to the future part. What's happening next? I mean, Vaadin 7 is done. I could go on a vacation for a year or so, but that's not likely to happen. Of course, we're doing maintenance releases for Vaadin 7 and Vaadin 6. For Vaadin 7, with a bit more rapid schedule than for Vaadin 6. At least in the beginning, I think we're moving to 4.7. It's unfortunate that it didn't fit into the schedule, so we have rescheduled it for 7.1. Also, we are taking our AGPL CWAL commercial component Vaadin calendar, making that open source Apache 2 licensed and including this in Vaadin 7.1. Another feature that was in Vaadin 7 feature list, dynamic CSS injection, is also something we're including in 7.1. One of the reasons for this was that our guys weren't able to make our demo without this add-on. So I guess there is an add-on for this right now, so I guess it's a needed feature for the framework. Now we we also have some improvements on the teaming part. The SAS compiler currently doesn't support arithmetics. Arithmetics are very useful in your themes. You can do increase by 1 or multiply by 2 or whatever. It also prevents you from copy-pasting a lot of stuff. Debug console, well, those of you who have developed with Vaadin know that it behaves a bit strange, resizing using shift and so on, being a little bit too small to fit all components by default. We're looking over this to make it up to speed with the rest of the framework and make it more usable so you actually can more easily see what's going on there when you have a problem. And, well, finally, we are working on native IE10 support. Right now we support IE10, but it's running in IE9 mode, so we don't have access to all the latest CSS and other features of IE10. The schedule for this April, so not planning to put much more than 2.5 months into this. Another quite large feature we are working on is the Vaadin CDI. If you are using Java EE, then context and dependency injection should mean something to you. If you have tried to use it with Vaadin, you might have run into some issues or questions or how you should use these two together. This is something we're aiming to solve with the Vaadin CDI add-on. This actually started as a research project already last year. There is a repository with code for this, but it's not a product yet. It hasn't been released. So what is CDI? Well, CDI is a lot of stuff. For Vaadin, for instance, it will mean that you can just annotate your UI classes, you can annotate your views, and you will have all the servlet stuff, WebXML stuff taken care of for you automatically by the CDI add-on. Now, this is not everything CDI, it's pretty much about injection, inversion of control, and once you use Vaadin, the Vaadin CDI add-on to create your UIs, you are also able to use all the CDI features, all the injections like EJBs, injecting events using the event bus of CDI and so on in your Vaadin application. This is something that we will release with Apache 2 license. Beta version of this coming up March. A couple of sad news about our add-ons. The Vaadin plugin for Spring Rule and the Vaadin web services for remote portrait won't be getting any Vaadin 7 updates. They will just remain Vaadin 6 compatible as today. There hasn't been that much of interest in these add-ons. We're talking about LiveRay now, so we have a Vaadin control panel for LiveRay. This is something that our partner Artur is working on to create a Vaadin 7 version of this. Vaadin JPA container, another commercial add-on, will also be ported to Vaadin 7. Its license will also be changed to Apache 2 to be free to use in all projects. And this will happen very soon now. So during February we should have a JPA container 3.0 that supports Vaadin 7 and is free to use. We also have Vaadin charts currently available in beta or alpha, I can't remember. Beta, okay. So we have the Vaadin charts containing a lot of nice charts coming out this month in a couple of weeks, providing you with a nice way of doing charting in your application. This will also be followed up by a 1.1 release of charts containing even more chart types in March this year. Also, Vaadin Touch Kit will get the Vaadin 7 update. I will not go into details of this. It will have some new components like the new combo box and the new date field more suited for touch devices and other nice stuff. Now we have also talked about a new table for I think as long as I have been in the company, and we're now finally going to start working on this. I don't have a timetable for this. I only know it's going to be great and awesome and much better than the current table. But what I do know is we will start working any week now on this. We expect it to take a very long time to get it right. So I wouldn't expect any results before Q3 this year. Now another thing we did with Vaadin 7, we moved it to GitHub. So if you want to start develop Vaadin 7, just fork it on GitHub, make your patches, do whatever you like. It's there for you. Also the Git repository, which is a branch of the mainstream Git, is available in GitHub or GitHub. Sadly, we won't be able to accept pull requests, at least at the moment, through GitHub, but we're working on other ways to make it much easier for the community to contribute directly to the project. Right, I think I was out of time some time ago, but I'll just stop here. And if you have any questions, I don't know, should we take them by cake or here?
We have time for a couple of questions.
We have time for a couple of questions.
Is Vaadin 8 done yet?
Vaadin 8 will be done pretty soon. But we're not starting on it this year. And probably not the next year.